When I first learned of the story of the SS Kamloops and the tragic events that befell her on December 6th, 1927, it was presented to me in a way as if it were a folklore or legend or a fictitious ghost story. And the more I read into the story and the more I learned about these 22 people who went down on this ship, the more I felt, well, this isn't right. This story is very much real. When the Kamloops went down, about half of her crew almost went down with her. And then pictures and video surfaced of the Kamloops and her crew that went down with her, that have been preserved for almost 100 years down there with her. And then another side of the story is one particular survivor, a woman I learned, young woman in fact, wrote a letter of her events and her last final moments, as she was all alone and perished on the island. On the episode today of Songs of the Great Lakes, I'm going to be going over the events that took place for a young Alice Bettridge, 23 years old, and her final moments and a bit of her early life as well. I will be handling this story with the utmost respect, care, and dignity for these people. And I hope at the end of this video we can remember them and that they may never be forgotten. So without further ado, this is the story of Alice Emma Bettridge. Alice was born in London, England in 1904. Her father was Henry Augustus Bettridge, and her mother was Emma Schofield Steele. She also had siblings, Henry, Alfred, and her younger siblings, born in Canada, Harold, Madeline, and William. Alice and her family immigrated to Canada with her parents and her two older brothers in 1907. From there, they settled in Southampton, Bruce County, Ontario, on the shores of Lake Huron. Alice began to work as an assistant steward, a stewardess, in 1926. She would assist Southampton's first steward, Janet Nettie Grafton, and this was on the steamer Chicago Tribune. Alice would join Nettie again in the spring of 1927 for that year's shipping season on the Great Lakes. In December of 1927, they would be serving together on the package freighter Kamloops. This would be during the ship's last trip of the season, and both of them were planning to return home to Southampton by Christmas. The Kamloops was caught in a horrific snowstorm/gale. This took place either very late on December 6th or in the early morning hours of December 7th, 1927. Throughout the tragic events that took place for the Kamloops, it is surmised that she became overwhelmed by the waves and the building of ice on her. The Kamloops went down, and somehow Alice, whether she made it to shore on the island of Isle Royale on the life raft, or possibly pieces of wreckage from the Kamloops, or even she swam to the Isle Royale shores. I can only imagine how cold the temperatures of the waters of Lake Superior that night would have been. 13 people went down with the Kamloops when she sank, Miss Nettie Grafton, the head steward, being one of them, along with the captain and many other crew members. However, 9 made it ashore to Isle Royale, and Alice was one of them. It's unclear how long Alice survived on the island by herself in those frigid, terrible temperatures in that winter blizzard, but she had managed to write a note that was found. I'm going to now read some of the note that has been reconstructed that was found from her. Kamloops went down with all hands near the extreme west point of Isle Royale on December 6th, possibly 7th. All hands but myself. Finder, please notify office or Sue daily. so my people will know my fate. Tell them it was just me who is not dead. Please do not disregard this note. Please, SOS, SOS. Cold, cold, bitter, wondrous cold. Very urgent. Please notify Sioux Star or Canada Canal. It's negative 48 degrees Fahrenheit here, now. Our bare wire cargo loaded with ice, and we capsized in 18 fathoms of water. Wrecked. This is just some of the letter that was found from Alice that she had wrote as she was alone on Isle Royale. About a year after the sinking of the Kamloops, trapper Luis Coutu discovered a note in a tightly corked bottle at the mouth of the Agawa River. This was on the northeast shore of Lake Superior, about 150 miles east of Isle Royale. Luis eventually gave the note to Captain Herbert James Bryan. He was of Kingston, who was the brother of the captain of the Kamloops. The giving up of this note to the family was absolutely monumental. It was forwarded to the Bettridge family in Southampton. The family then verified the handwriting and the signature that they were in fact Alice's, their daughters. Again in 1928, a newspaper article titled "Southampton Mourns Death of Stewardesses." They praised Alice as a very bright and promising young girl of 22 years of age. Alice was respected by everybody. She had a charming personality which endured to a host of friends who deeply deplored her untimely death. Another article read, "The body at the lake head is identified as that of Miss Alice Bettridge, described as Alice, an estimable young lady, popular with her companions and well liked in Southampton." After everything Alice had gone through on the Kamloops, she died alone from exposure in the freezing wilderness of Isle Royale. Her body was found and recovered some time later. There were also 5 other Kamloops crew members' bodies that were also recovered as well. A memorial article was written in a newspaper article, and it wrote, "From Alice's family, in loving memory of Alice Bettridge, who was lost on the Kamloops on December 7th, 1927, on Lake Superior. She bade no one a last farewell. She waved her hand to none. Her spirit flew before we knew that she from us had gone. We loved her, yes, we loved her, but Jesus loved her more, for he has sweetly called her beyond the shining shore. Sadly missed by parents, brothers, and sister." What exactly happened completely that night will probably forever be a mystery. Clues from Alice's note and maybe other survivor stories recounting what happened to the Kamloops give us somewhat of a picture. However, how did Alice make it to the island, and how long was Alice able to survive on the island by herself, 23, alone in a terrible blizzard, before dying of exposure? There's much more that could be said for Alice and her life, and probably still family members or friends that knew family members from back then that are alive today. I do hope that this short video of the Kamloops for Alice and the other crew members for what they went through that night can bring some respect and light to their stories. May they never be forgotten. And this particular story and impact has been on my heart for a while. I do hope to do many more stories, different things, different topics about the Kamloops. But for this one, I just wanted to bring a light of truth on Alice and a short glimmer of what her story was and what she went through that night, December 6th or December 7th, 1927. I thank you everyone so very much for joining me on this episode. And if you have any additional information, thoughts, corrections, wordage, anything like that, please do leave them down in the comment section below. But thank you again so very much for joining me on this episode of Songs of the Great Lakes. And as always, until next time, God bless you all.